Dozens of people, including children, have been injured in Ukraine after a series of overnight Russian missile strikes. Most of them are in Pavlohrad, east of Dnipro. The region's governor says it sparked a large fire in the city's industrial area. Apartment blocks, schools and shops have been destroyed. In Kyiv, air defense systems could be seen intercepting missiles as air raid sirens rang out across the country for 3 hours. It's the second pre-dawn attack Russia has launched in 3 days.
Once I heard the first explosions, I shouted to my wife, "Let's quickly put on clothes and get outside." Here is what I put on. We had only gotten to the corridor when I heard another explosion. I was thrown by the explosion wave. Windows were blown out. It is good we were not outdoors because I don't know what would happen to us. Professionals told me there is a missile engine over there. Sauna and garage used to be here. Here is our dining room. As you can see, doors were smashed. And here is the ceiling.
More on that in a moment, but a Russian freight train has derailed in the Bryansk region, which borders Ukraine and Belarus, after what local officials say was a blast caused by an explosive device. The incident happened about 60 kilometers north of Russia's border with Ukraine. The train was thought to have been transporting oil and construction materials. Russian railways say a locomotive and 7 carriages had come off the track. No casualties have been reported since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 14 months ago. There have been several reports of sabotage on Russia's railways. Well, for more on the war in Ukraine, let's speak to Arise special correspondent Karl Bostic, who joins me from our studio in London. Good to see you, Karl. Let's start with that wave of overnight missile attacks on Ukraine. Tell us what you know about those attacks.
Charles, what you need to consider is this. We spoke about that first wave going back to Friday, so actually this is maybe 4 days later. Very simply, this is part of an overall Russian strategy to, quite frankly, stretch thin Ukraine's air defense capability. We discussed, and I referenced a leaked document from the Pentagon that expressed concern from Washington that Ukraine just didn't have enough munitions for its air defense system and needed to restock it badly. In fact, one dire forecast said that by the end of May, their air defense system would be almost completely depleted. So what you have going on, Charles, is this. These attacks were nowhere near the front line, Charles. They were, in the town that you mentioned. The Russians say these are military targets. Ukrainians are saying that these are residential buildings. But what we're seeing is a barrage of these missile-type attacks. And even though Ukraine is saying that, well, we shot down 15 or 18 of these cruise missiles, Charles, launched by strategic Russian bombers coming from the Murmansk region in Russia, as well as from the Caspian Sea. But the thing is this, there's only so much you have to shoot these down. And then you also have the drones as well. To put things in perspective, Charles, those drones that are used to also just wreak havoc in Kiev and other cities, they cost anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 to make, Charles. But each time you have a drone or missile shot down by Ukraine, it costs anywhere from $140,000 to $500,000 each time. And they're running out of munitions. So this is a strategy that's meant to prelude the counteroffensive that could begin anytime soon.
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about that counteroffensive in a moment, Karl, if we've got some time. But we're also getting reports of an attack that targeted the city of Pavlohrad in central Ukraine, which hit an industrial plant. We saw some of the pictures there, fairly dramatic. And it's been reported that the Russians may well have hit an ammunition store in Pavlohrad, which may account for the size of the resulting explosion and fire, some of which we can see on our screens now.
Yes, that's right. I mean, that's what's coming out of the Russian Defense Ministry. But meanwhile, from the Ukrainian point of view, they're also saying that residential buildings were also hit, including homes and schools. At least 30 were injured, 34 or so. And that's the problem, because you have competing narratives. The Russians saying we're only striking military targets. Ukrainians saying civilians are paying the price. And Charles, one last thing to keep in mind, all of these attacks are happening at night, early in the morning, where it's much, much more difficult to detect either these missiles or these drones.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And by way of context, Karl, you were talking about that the Ukrainians preparing for a counter-offensive. I mean, this could be an indication, couldn't it, of how Russia might respond to such Ukrainian battlefield advances and Moscow's way of trying to lessen that counter-offensive. I mean, this is the second, as you said, big wave of attacks targeting cities across Ukraine in just 3 days.
That's right, Charles. And as I said just a moment ago, perhaps, unfortunately, tragically, expect more of this and expect it to happen late at night, because this counteroffensive right now, the big X factor, Charles, is the weather. Ukraine has got newly delivered equipment from the West, including very, very expensive, high-tech tanks from Germany and howitzer-type weapons. Those machinery, Charles, weigh about 60 tons. The problem is this: southern Ukraine, where that offensive would start, is effectively still just a sea of mud. It's a quagmire. These are 60-ton vehicles. They're going nowhere fast. There is no confidence in mounting this until the ground hardens, and this may not happen until the end of May, for example. In the meantime, you have a situation where these waves of attacks are happening, which could be depleting Ukrainian stocks, because it's also a test. Basically, Ukraine, they're using munitions faster than the West can supply them. That's what's going on right now. On the ground, artillery-wise, they've gone down from 10,000 shells a day being fired to 7,000 to 3,000 shells, because they cannot keep up with the pace. And that's what Russia's counting on.
Well, it sounds like a real quagmire, which is more than just being stuck in the mud. Karl, thanks very much indeed. Karl Bostic, Arise special correspondent, talking to me there from our studios in London.